Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates post-game live after the Warriors suffer a very disappointing 129-99 loss to the Sacramento Kings at Chase Center on Sunday night. You guys are going to have to help me out a little bit because I didn't actually watch the entirety of the game. I was unfortunately at a funeral for the first quarter and a half. Got home, turned on the TV straight away. The Warriors were down 56-41 at that point. And so I thought, oh, geez, okay, that's disappointing. But then it only got worse over the last 3 or 4 minutes of the first half that I watched there. The Warriors ended up going down 75-51 at halftime. And then I watched the entire second half, but wasn't really engaged in it too much because the players just didn't really seem engaged too much. It was an incredibly flat performance from the Warriors. Just to give up, again, I didn't watch much of it. I only watched the last 3 or 4 minutes of the first half. But to give up 75 points in the first half to a Sacramento team without De'Aaron Fox, the Warriors entering as the 7th best defense in the league, that just tells you all you need to know about the energy in this game and just how disappointing that first half was. The Kings started on a 7-0 run, led 36-21 after the first. Steph has a couple of 4-point plays to get the Warriors within 4 few minutes into the second, and then the final 8-9 minutes of that second quarter there was a disaster. And again, the second half felt just like going through the motions. The Warriors kept turning the ball over, 22 turnovers, 22 assists, just not going to cut it. And that meant that they never, ever had an opportunity to even get a comeback effort off the ground, let alone be any kind of threat of winning that game. So really, really disappointing. Going to get through your guys' comments here. Again, I did a podcast episode this morning with Austin McGee of Pippen Ain't Easy. If you haven't checked that out already, please do. Really fascinating chat, getting some Bulls perspective on a potential Vucevic trade. GSW says Warriors versus Salt Bay Lakers in a 7-game playoff series. I'm taking the Salt Bay Lakers. Talking about G League stuff there. And, that's how the Warriors are playing right now and how they've played. Obviously, the last 2 games, yesterday's game against the Grizzlies and the Philly game to start the year was good. But the Warriors, particularly offensively, have been a downright disaster over the last month or so. GSW says that Vucevic trade is starting to look really nice. Again, spoke about it for over half an hour earlier today with Austin. Again, check that out if you haven't already. Sai says, amen to that. This team can't get anywhere, even with a Vooch trade, in my opinion. Daniel Hall says, would Bronny give this team 30 in the first quarter? Goodness me. Bronny catching strays after a Warriors-Kings game. Interesting, but that's kind of goes to show you what this game was like. Sai says, Draymond is alternating his efforts on games. Looks gas, predictable passing game, sloppy passes. Our defense would be better if we don't bring that up. Yeah, I do agree with you on Draymond. If he's not bringing the effort and the intensity and the energy, then he's a pretty limited basketball player these days because he requires that. He needs that energy to be the defensive force that we know him to be. I also don't think it helps that the Warriors are asking him to play so much small ball 5, which again would go down to, hey, let's make a trade for another big right here before the deadline. So I do think that's an aspect of it. I said it plenty of times previously that having him as a small ball 5 for a significant amount of minutes each game is not sustainable over an 82-game regular season. It might be sustainable over a playoff run. It might be sustainable for a 5-10 game stretch here and there. It's not sustainable across an 82-game season for a guy that is nearly 35 years old who has played as much basketball as he has, not just in the regular season, but of course all the playoff appearances, all the long playoff runs that Draymond's now got on his body. It starts to catch up to you, and I think it's pretty unfair to be asking him as a 6'6" guy to be going out guarding Domantas Sabonis, Nikola Jokic, Embiid, Zach Edey, even last night, Victor Wembanyama. There are so many talented big men in the league, so many big men in the league right now who you also can't, I don't think the Warriors can necessarily push those guys defensively in a way they once could 5 or 6 years ago. Like the traditional big men, going back 5, 6, closer to even 10 years ago, you could play them off the floor on the defensive side. So whatever those guys were bringing offensively, the Warriors were getting just as much, if not more, back defensively. And then, the opposing coach was really, in a situation of, hey, do we go small and match what the Warriors are doing, or do we try and go big? And the Warriors are really getting mismatches and benefiting off that. I just think nowadays, big men, usually most can just move their feet a little bit better, a bit more athletic, even bigger than what they were just lengthwise, and that obviously makes up for a lot. And so I just don't think the Warriors are necessarily getting the offensive benefits that they once did in terms of, going small and playing with pace. Sai says, did you look at Monk walking up to threes like it was his backyard gym? No man-to-man coverage. This team is a shell of itself, bro. Yeah, Monk had a huge game, 26 points, 12 assists. Again, taking advantage of no De'Aaron Fox in the extra ball handling, playmaking duties there. Was red hot from three. The Kings were pretty red hot as a team offensively, obviously. Again, putting up 75 first half points. They weren't particularly missing. Sai says, lose to a Kings team without Fox by 30. I don't know anymore. Daniel says, the game was unwatchable defensively. Wish we could have had JK to get some quality garbage time minutes today. Well, I think Kuminga's too good for that. I don't think you would have seen some Kuminga garbage time. But they certainly did miss him. And Steph actually looked okay, 26 points, 7 rebounds. Again, those pair of 4-point plays in the second quarter. But he was kind of a one-man show offensively. Wiggins had 18 points. They weren't overly impactful. Was reasonably efficient, 7 of 13. But this is going to be the issue is, without Kuminga, who do the Warriors turn to? And sometimes you just need guys who can get buckets, and I just don't know who that is from a Warrior perspective, who is capable of putting up 20 to 25 points. And it's Curry, and it's maybe Wiggins, and it's maybe Schroeder, but we haven't seen it yet in a Warrior uniform. I'm not sure if Schroeder playing alongside Steph is going to be capable of, getting you 20 points. No one can do it. Buddy Hield maybe won every 10 games. And again, it's probably why the Kuminga situation and the injury now, and the fact he's going to be out for multiple weeks, it's going to be at least 11 games, that probably furthers the Warriors' need for a trade for a guy like Vucevic who can just give you 20 and 10. He can just give you 20 and 10. And my goodness, some of the TJD finishing stuff again, I'm sorry to harp on it every single time, but oh my goodness, can this guy make a layup, please? What is going on? Sai says, I hope Steph gets at least a competitive team next season so we could make a run. But with Spurs, OKC, Cavs getting better every year, I don't see a pathway for another ring. I could be wrong and would be happy to be wrong on that prediction. Yeah, you see like all these young teams who are already good, who've got assets to get even better, like San Antonio, like OKC, who've both got heaps of first-round picks banked up. They've got superstar players, Shane, Wemby. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to see a pathway, as you outline here, for the Warriors to get back to some semblance of contention in the Western Conference, particularly. Daniel says, no, I agree with you. That I think that might, whatever that was in regard to. So I says, we've got to get Mike Brown this season so he will have a whole offseason to devise defensive strategies or alter our current ones. Work with our young guys and be a force to be reckoned with. Well, I mean, they entered the game as the 7th-ranked defense in the league, which is fine. They probably need to be better than that, honestly. I think this offense, particularly with Kuminga now out, I think defensively they probably even need to be better than 7th. But I don't know, there's been some concerning games here recently where they just haven't really shown up on the defensive end and they haven't brought that effort and energy. Again, maybe you can kind of give them some leeway given they were on the second night of a back-to-back and it truly showed that. But still a very disappointing result. They've obviously brought in Jerry Stackhouse, who's leading the defense. You'd be surprised to see the Warriors get rid of him so soon and bring in Mike Brown. But Mike Brown was a championship-level defensive coach for the Warriors, and maybe that's what you need. Daniel says Mike Brown would be cool, but I don't know if it's a coaching thing. Stackhouse was cooking early in the season. We are just around a 45-48 win team right now. Yep, I agree with that. Vaughn says it's time to go get Vooch. We could have used his defensive rebounding. Yeah, well, as I spoke about with Austin this morning, or he spoke about, I kind of asked him about the legitimacy of those defensive concerns. He said, yeah, he's a defensive liability, but the one thing he does do is he does get to defensive rebounds. Like he does rebound the ball at a higher level, and so at least that's something. He also, like, he's not a rim protector by any means, but he did say that, like, coming up against guys that live in the paint, he's not horrific. It's more so the liabilities come if you have a stretch big like himself, like that's going to space out to the perimeter and start hitting perimeter shots. And if he needs to get switched on to the perimeter against smaller guys, like, he's just going to get cooked. And, a guy like Sabonis today, he's like a similar-ish player to Vucevic, I suppose, in terms of very offensively skilled, but is limited defensively. And the Warriors just don't have anyone that can go at Sabonis. Like, they do not have anyone at that big man position. Like, Draymond's not torching Sabonis on defense. TJD is not torching Sabonis. In fact, he's missing open layups. Looney has guarded Sabonis very well in the past, but his main strengths are obviously on the defensive end and with rebounding, and he's not a guy that's going to be able to cook Sabonis. Like, if you brought Vucevic into a game like that, maybe Sabonis's impact can be negated somewhat. Maybe he still puts up his numbers, 23 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists, whatever he had. Maybe he still puts up the numbers, but a guy like Vucevic could actually make Sabonis work on the other end, which I think is, again, another reason why you might want to make that trade. Daniel says, I feel like with JK out possibly until the deadline, there is less reason to get Vuce. It's not his defense, but the lineups with JK that he unlocks. Yeah, I see where you're coming from there. I also, as I said before, like, maybe you just need his offense. Maybe you just need a guy that can get you 20 and 10. And it's not as if Kuminga's going to be out for months and months here. It's going to be 3 weeks. Hopefully he's back before the deadline. And so from what Austin was saying today, there's a good chance here that nothing happens until, the 24, 48 hours before the deadline. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully maybe something happens here in the next couple of weeks. But if they don't get Vucevic until February 5, February 6 anyway, then Kuminga's probably going to be back by that time. And so, you still go out and get Vucevic, I think, if you can. GSW says this year and the next are probably the last hopes to contend with it for a title if we have any hope at this point. What grade ankle sprain did JK have? Well, they didn't say what grade. They just said a significant ankle sprain, and then he will be reassessed, reevaluated in 3 weeks, which 3 weeks is now 11 games during that period. So that's a fair while, like 11 games and 3 weeks just to be reassessed. Like, that's not him coming back at that point. That's reassessed. So it's going to be fascinating to see how long it actually is. Like, it could be longer than that. It could be 4 to 5 weeks. It could be 15 to 20 games, which, again, that's so disappointing on multiple fronts, but not least because of how Kuminga was playing, nearly 25 points a game in his previous 6 games, 8 rebounds. Like, the rebounding was excellent, really using his athleticism. Over 3 assists a game, shooting over 52% from the floor. The 3-point shot was, I think the 3-pointer comes around a little bit when he actually gets a consistent role. Like, it's the same with Moody. When those guys play consistent minutes, you see the shooting numbers are so much better than when they're getting that inconsistent role where one night's 15 minutes and the next night's 25 minutes. So that's the most disappointing aspect. Kuminga was in the best stretch of his career, and he goes down here at a really disappointing time for him. And you got to remember, like, he's going to be a restricted free agent in the offseason. He needs as much opportunity here to try and showcase himself as, a $150 million guy. So for him personally, it's really disappointing. It's also maybe another reason, again, these things can happen, and maybe it's why Kuminga should have taken the extension that the Warriors offered in the offseason. Again, whatever that was, there has been some reports it was around 150. I would have taken that if I was Kuminga, but he didn't, backed himself. These things can happen. Fortunately, it's not a torn ACL, torn Achilles, like 12-month thing. It's hopefully going to be less than a month, but it's still at a really bad time for him and a really bad time for the team who just really need him now. And I suppose maybe that goes to show you the issues Golden State are facing with, a game like this one where they really struggle offensively, they really struggle defensively, and they just really needed Jonathan Kuminga in this game. And if the Warriors are going to be this reliant on Jonathan Kuminga, maybe that's a real problem, because you probably shouldn't be as reliant on a guy who has, been good over the last 12 months, it must be said, but he's not he's still your 6th man. Like, he's not even a starting player for you right now. And so to be as reliant on him as they are, that's probably concerning. Daniel says, if he does come back, he could be a slow ramp up to. He was playing super well, but even if he comes back slow, I'm not reading too much into it. Yeah, like there's always leeway here with guys. Like I'm usually pretty patient with guys coming back from injury. I'm also often surprised by how well guys come back from injury. So fingers crossed he can kind of come back and pick up where he left off. But again, like the fact that he has these great 6 games, like I think Steve said, after the Philly game, he said that was, it's 5 great games from Kuminga in a row. Draymond saying, he's going to become a superstar. And so this is like a really unfortunate time for him to get injured so shortly. Like if we saw a 20-game sample size of this and it's like, well, okay, this guy's really taken off. It's 20 games where he's averaged 24 points, 8 rebounds, 52% shooting. Then I kind of, if he gets an 11-game, 15-game injury, then it's like, okay, but at least we've just seen those 20 games. The fact that it was 6 games and now he's got that injury, it kind of takes us a step back. And it kind of feels like the big step he did take has now kind of dissipated somewhat, which is really disappointing. So, yeah, not too much else to be said from a Warrior standpoint in this game against Steph. Had 26 and 7, looked fresh, which is understandable given he rested on the first night of a back-to-back. And fortunately, the Warriors got the win in that game, because if they'd lost that game, lost Kuminga, and then lost this game, it'd be an absolute downright disaster right now. And it still kind of is a little bit, but I mean, again, at least you can look at that win over the Grizzlies and say, all right, well, at least we've got that to hold on to from the weekend's action. Wiggins, as I said, had 18 points. Moses, maybe just filling up that trade value a little bit. He was, we spoke about him on the podcast earlier today as a player that the Bulls could potentially be interested in. He had 13 points. A lot of those came in the fourth, 5 of 10 shooting, 3 of 6 from three-point range. He's shooting like 40% from 3 for the season. It's one of life's great mysteries, the Moses Moody experience with the Warriors and the Moses Moody experience under Steve Kerr. It's a genuine mystery because he's shooting 40% from 3. You think he's this prototypical 3-and-D wing, and yet his minutes are still somewhat limited. He played 26 today, but again, that played basically, I think, all the fourth, which was just all garbage time. Aside from that, not much to be spoken about from a Warrior perspective. Draymond, 10, 4, and 4, did make a couple of threes, but had 5 turnovers. Schroeder, not good. 3 points, 1 of 7, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. He just looked so much more comfortable in a game yesterday where Steph is missing. And it's kind of like the Chris Paul thing, where if Steph does have to miss some time or if he's resting or whatever, then it's great to be able to have the luxury of having a guy as good as Dennis Schroeder available to you, but he's just not that impactful and not that valuable for you when Steph's in the lineup. And of course, Steph has to be in the lineup and will play 90% of games, you'd imagine. So it's a bit rough. And whether or not you use that in a potential trade again, but at February 5 for something that's going to be a better fit next to Steph, there's still a few weeks here to evaluate whether that's going to be the case or not. Other than that, tough viewing. Trace, 0 points, 0 of 3, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, minus 16. I had a colleague of mine just say before, like, Trace Jackson-Davis is not a starting caliber center on a good playoff team. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's something I've been saying since the start of the season. Like, he's not that guy yet. Now, he's been very good, and I'm not gonna shake off and completely forget the last 7 or 8 games from him, or probably even closer to 10 games that have been really good. I'm not going to, get rid of those just based on this one bad performance. But I think it does go to reiterate, like, you need someone sometimes who can put the ball in the basket and who can actually make the offensively talented guys work on defense. And that's why I think they should still trade for Vucevic and hopefully in the next couple of weeks rather than necessarily waiting, because as I've said many times before, if they wait too long and they actually don't make a deal until February 5, February 6 in the last 24 hours before the deadline, that might be too long, right? That might be too long. You need to because as we've seen with Schroeder, there's also a period of acclimatizing to a new team and a new offense, and we don't know how Vucevic could necessarily come into that and how he would adapt. So there's a period of acclimatization, and you don't want to be in a situation where, we've got to the end of February, we're still waiting for Nikola Vucevic to acclimatize. The Schroeder thing's still not really working. And, oh, my God, now we're 5 games under 500 and we're actually no chance of making the playoffs, let alone do anything more. So, I don't know. We'll wait and see. Buddy Hield, 3 of 7, 1 of 5, not great. Moody, again, was okay. Waters, Looney played some fourth quarter minutes. I mean, there's nothing. There's nothing to write home about here. It wasn't good. Just a few more comments before I finish up. Playing the best ball of his career, to be honest now. It's just more question marks. Is that in regard to... who is that in regard to? Sorry, I missed it. Was it Kuminga or Moody maybe? Daniel said Steph looked good coming back, 20 in the first half, so that's a bright spot. Yeah, I mean, Steph was Steph. Looked fine. Didn't look impeded by the knee issues or the sprained thumb or whatever he had. Then Nick says we are so inconsistent. When Steph is in the team, it's like everyone but him forgets how to play basketball. It is weird. Like the Warriors are what now, 5-2 or 6-2 without Steph Curry in the lineup, and considerably worse with him in the lineup. Now the on-off numbers when he is playing suggest that obviously the Warriors are better with him, but it is fascinating. Then Nick says we need a big. We couldn't even get offensive rebounds. FTW Clan says, just got to get Vooch. I don't see why not. It gives us a different look and something else to try. This team just isn't good enough, and Vooch is a low-risk, very attainable player to pick up. Seems like the further this goes, the more fans are coming around to, let's just go get Vucevic. And particularly with like the report that the Warriors are out on Butler. So the whole idea of not getting Vucevic was, we'll just wait until a star becomes available before the deadline. Well, I don't think that's happening. Like, things can change. Things can very well change in the next month, but the reports are that the Warriors are already out on Jimmy Butler. So if it's not Jimmy Butler, then who's the other star that becomes available? It's not going to be LeBron James. Maybe it's Zion Williamson, but that's a huge risk in itself. And I think that's probably something more for the offseason where you could go get Vucevic now. And as I said to Austin earlier, you could go get Vucevic now, and you could then on-trade Vucevic, and he could be a key salary piece along with assets to go and get that star player, Zion Williamson or someone else making closer to $40 million in the offseason. Like, reassess then. Now, I know that's annoying because maybe that's somewhat giving up your chances or any chance you had this season. But if a star player is not available before this deadline, then they're just not available. You can't just pluck one out of the air. Maybe the Suns continue to fall off a cliff here, and KD reassesses his options in the offseason, or Devin Booker even. And then in that scenario, you've got, you could go out and get one of those guys. But in the meantime, just go get Vucevic, and it doesn't really hurt your flexibility to go and make another move in the offseason. So you just got to do it. Then X says, what do the Bulls want for Vucevic? So again, check out my podcast with Austin, but just to summarize, basically he's pretty high on Moody, and it's either Moody or a first rounder. So it's obviously the salaries that would have to match, which are most likely going to be GP2 and Loon is expiring deals. The Bulls are going to be probably more incentivized for those guys rather than the long-term deals of Anderson and Buddy Hield. And then Moody's the young prospect that I think many of us and opposing fans as well still think this guy's got something. We just haven't seen it. Obviously, he's been locked away from Steve Kerr over the past few years, and that's still a guy that he could be the key to unlocking a Vucevic trade. If it's not Moody, then it's probably going to have to be the contracts matching up. And then, Austin says a first-round pick. I'm still optimistic that maybe they can get him for a couple of seconds. But I think if that's the case, then you'd have to wait until the February 6th deadline and wait Chicago out. I don't think Chicago are going out tomorrow and making a deal that sends Vucevic out for a couple of seconds. I think if you offered Moody, then they'd go out and do it tomorrow. And so that's probably where it's at. Sai says Jerry Stackhouse might be trying his best, but it ain't cutting it. Brown has won a championship with our team. He's got the respect. Yeah, possibly. I don't know if you could have both of them. I think it'd be awkward if you just kicked Stackhouse out of his role for Mike Brown. Could Mike Brown come in a different role? I don't know. Maybe too many people at the table in that scenario. But anyway, I'm going to finish it up there. Not too much to be spoken about in this game. Very disappointing. The bigger news is really the Kuminga stuff and how disappointing that is and the implications that could have on Golden State season and potential trade stuff as well over the next month. The Warriors play the Miami Heat on Tuesday, somewhat ironically given the whole Butler situation at the moment. Of course, Butler won't be playing for the Heat, but they're still dangerous given Bam Adebayo, a very much improved Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and a few others floating around the traps there for the Heat. So I'll be back after that game for a post-game live. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. You can follow us Golden State with Mates on Instagram and TikTok as well. And other than that, guys, for those of you in America, enjoy the remaining hours of your weekend.